Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chicken and broccoli curry. That's right, there are a handful of basic fundamental recipes that anyone that really wants to learn how to cook has to master. And that's because the same basic technique's going to work no matter what meats and vegetables and spices you use. And it's learning to make dishes like this that allows you to go from someone that knows how to follow a recipe to someone that actually creates recipes, which is not only way more enjoyable, it also pays a lot better. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by mixing up our curry spice blend. And this time we'll be going with some ground cumin, some ground coriander, some paprika, and you can use either regular or smoked. Okay, dealer's choice. We will also toss in some turmeric, as well as some freshly ground black pepper, and then of course some salt. And then we will finish up with our good old friend cayenne pepper. And that's it. We'll go ahead and take a spoon and give this a mix. And depending on exactly what we're going to include in our curry, we may want to include some other or different spices here. But generally, we are going to want to start this process by mixing up some sort of dry spice blend. And then what we'll do once that is mixed up is go ahead and apply about half of it to whatever meat we're going to use in our curry, which for me this time is going to be a couple large boneless, skinless chicken breasts. And we'll take about 50% of our mixture and apply it very generously to both sides. And yes, of course, if you wanted to use boneless, skinless chicken thighs, you could use those instead. And there's basically two approaches to this step. Okay, we could, if we want, cut our meat into smaller pieces and then toss it with these spices, which is probably what I would do if I was using thighs. But since we're using breast here, I prefer this approach where we coat the whole thing, and then what we'll do is sear this and partially cook it, and then cut up the meat. And that way I think we have much less chance of this drying out. And then time permitting, once these spices have been applied, I like to wrap this up and pop in the fridge for a few hours to give that meat plenty of time to absorb all those flavors. But having said that, if you do want this a little quicker, you could skip this step and just start cooking. All right, that's up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the Anne Murray of making curry in a hurry. But personally, I do like to let mine sit in the fridge for at least a few hours. And while we're waiting for that, we might as well go ahead and prep our broccoli, which I like to start by cutting the florets off the stems, for the very simple reason that those cook a lot faster. So by separating them at this point, we'll be able to add those at different times during the cooking process, and hopefully end up with a much more consistent final product. And what we'll do for the much more fibrous, tougher stem parts is go ahead and slice those lengthwise into some kind of semi-uniform strips, at which point we can then turn those, and then slice them across like this, into whatever size pieces you want. And as usual, the exact size of these pieces really doesn't matter, as long as they're fairly consistent. So pick a size and stick with it. And then as far as the tops go, I like to cut down straight through the piece of stem that's holding that head together, so we can divide those into a little more bite-sized pieces. So I went ahead and did that to about a pound of broccoli total, and then transfer that into 2 bowls. And then assuming our chicken is sat spiced in the fridge long enough, we'll go ahead and pull that out and cook it in some butter set over medium-high heat. But not all the way. Okay, we're only going to do this for about 3 minutes per side, just so it cooks about halfway through. Since once we have this cut up, we are going to toss this back in our curry to finish cooking. Okay, so we're basically just searing on some of the spices and firming up these breasts a little bit so we can get a nice clean cut. Not to mention starting to develop the flavors in this pan. So once those are set, we'll turn off the heat and we'll transfer those onto a plate and we'll let those sit until they're cool enough to handle. And then while those are resting, we will head back to the stove to build our curry sauce, which we'll start by turning our heat back on to medium-high. And we will sizzle some crushed garlic in that hot butter for about 30 seconds or so, before stirring in the rest of our curry spice mix. And we'll toast all that in that hot butter for another 30 seconds or so, which is really going to help bring out a lot of flavor. Okay, this is one of the secrets to making a decent curry. We always want to briefly toast those in the pan before adding our liquids. So that's what we'll do. Before adding in 1 can of coconut milk, all right, the full fat kind, do not use the low-fat coconut milk. We're going to need that fat. I'm also, believe it or not, going to toss in a little bit of ketchup, or as we call it in the world of curries, tomato chutney. And we'll go ahead and stir all that together, making sure we're rubbing all that delicious goodness off the bottom. And we will wait for this to come up to a simmer. And once it does, I like to turn it down to medium and let it cook for about 10 minutes. And then just so it doesn't reduce down too far, I also decided to throw in a splash of chicken broth. Or if times are tough, you could just use a splash of water. And we'll stir that in. And like I said, we'll let that simmer for about 10 minutes. After which, if everything's gone according to plan, it should look something like this. And then what we'll do once our curry sauce is set is go ahead and toss in our broccoli stems And we'll give those a stir, and we will cook them until they're almost but not quite tender, which I would love to tell you how long that's going to take, but I can't because I don't know how big you cut those. But you'll know, because after about 5 minutes, you'll go ahead and test them. And what we can do while those are cooking, if you're into multitasking, is go ahead and cube up our partially cooked chicken breast, which I'm going to do by cutting into about 1/2-inch strips, and then turning and cutting into about 1/2-inch cubes. And because these were partially cooked, this is only going to need a few minutes in that hot sauce to finish cooking perfectly. So we'll go ahead and cut up that chicken as shown, and then we'll head back to the stove, and assuming our broccoli stems are just about tender, we'll go ahead and add the tops, and we'll sort of poke those down a little bit until they're evenly distributed, at which point we'll cover this, and we'll let that cook for about 3 or 4 minutes, until those are almost tender. And again, I can't give you times. All right, you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And by self, I mean broccoli. And once you've determined that it's almost tender, we will go ahead and stir in our chicken and let it cook for maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, or until that chicken is just cooked through. Oh, and I should mention, if you are using thighs here, you probably want to add those to the pan when you add the broccoli stems, since those will take a little bit longer to cook than this breast meat. And that's it. Once everything's cooked to our liking, we are pretty much down to just checking this for seasoning. And if necessary, maybe stirring in a little more salt. Oh, and by the way, if you want bright green, still firm broccoli in this, feel free. It will definitely look better, but in my opinion, it will not taste better. Okay, I don't want it mushy and falling apart, but I do want my broccoli cooked very, very tender, which I believe is going to give it a better, less bitter, sweeter flavor. But of course, suit yourself. And that's it. Once we've tasted and adjusted the seasonings, we'll go ahead and serve that up on some rice, with of course plenty of that amazing flavorful sauce. And I went ahead and finished up with some freshly sliced green onions. Oh, and besides the fact that you can do this with all kinds of different meat and vegetables and spices, you can also, instead of putting this on rice, use it on noodles, or french fries for like a curry version of poutine. Oh yeah, I think Anne Marie would have liked that. And that's it. One of my all-time favorite curries was done and ready to enjoy. And because coconut milk has that rich, subtly sweet flavor, it just works so well with those big, bold aromatic spices we used. And as I touched on earlier, while this would work with any combination of meat and vegetables, chicken and broccoli is a wonderful combination, and one of my favorite pairings for a simple curry like this. And I know the food stylists aren't happy, but I make no apologies for fully cooking this broccoli. Okay, for me, a dish like this is classic comfort food, and when I think comfort food, I do not think about biting into still crunchy broccoli. But again, that's just personal preference, and if you want, you could just add that broccoli with the chicken and just cook it for a couple minutes at the end. But anyway, that's it. How to make a very simple coconut milk-based curry. With a few minor tweaks, this exact same technique will work with any kind of meat and vegetables. And the more you make this, trying different things, it becomes less a recipe and more just something delicious you make to eat. Which is not the only reason, but it is the main reason. I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.